My adopted friends, they say that they're fine with having adopted parents.
I've met several kids that are adopted. I treat them the same as I treat any other kids.
I adopted a daughter from China.
I myself am an adult adoptee, which means I was adopted as a baby here in the United States. And I also am a birth parent, which means that I placed my child for adoption.
As a counselor at an open adoption agency, I am honored to be a part of the process and support people as they're going through this.
I think it's definitely needed because there's lots of children in the world that need to go to better homes and have better families and just have a better life.
I was adopted when I was 3 years old. I remember a little bit about being adopted. I do not remember being dropped off, and I was not in an orphanage. I was in foster care.
When I was adopted, I think I was at least 6 months old. I can't remember.
I don't have any friends who were adopted, but I babysit some adopted kids. They don't remember anything about being adopted because they were adopted when they were really little.
I have a closed adoption. I was adopted in China, and I haven't a clue who my birth parents was, and neither do my parents, and I don't think the orphanage knew either, actually.
I really wanted to see my brother. I really wanted to meet him ever since I knew about him because I didn't know I had one until I was older and started to learn about my family, so I've really wanted to meet my brother ever since I knew about him.
I kind of wish that I did know who my birth parents were, but I could go fine throughout my whole life without knowing, though it would be kind of nice.
The foster people were kind of mean and didn't treat the other kids well. They just were mean. They yelled a lot too. I didn't really like my parents, my real parents. They were mean. I have not been treated differently because I was adopted, and yeah.
For women who are placing their children for adoption, we work with them to view parenting as well as adoption and to see which is a better path for them. But all along we will encourage them, if you want to parent, we will help you parent. Because we believe the best place for a child is with their biological family, and if that's not a possibility, then we offer adoptive parents as a resource.
Well, in international adoption, it's a fairly lengthy process. The dossier, which is the documents that they sent to China, when they sent them, I think were about 2.5 inches thick. There had been a series of interviews with social workers. They interview people that you know, references, all kinds of background checks that they do. And then once that's all completed, you kind of ante up the fees and then you wait.
I think there's such joy and such pain in an adoption, and so many people will say to the birth parent, "Oh, how could you do that?" And then they'll say to the adoptive parent, "Oh, it's so amazing you adopted," without realizing that it's two sides of the same coin.
Being a birth parent, I don't regret that I chose an adoption because I wasn't ready to be a parent, but I do regret the type of adoption I chose, and I do regret missing out on all my son's growing up years and participating with him. So I really hope in the near future I have contact with him. And I think that's probably what's driven me to work at Catholic Charities, because we do open adoptions where everybody's needs are considered and they're supported throughout the life of the adoption, whereas I have absolutely no contact with my son. And I haven't seen a picture of him in probably 4 years, so I don't even know what he's doing, what he's like, what he looks like, or any of that. So that's pretty sad.
As the counselor, it's also extremely difficult to wear both hats. The birth mom is grieving in a way that she'll probably, hopefully, never have to grieve again. It's the biggest loss that anyone could have, and they choose it for this child. So supporting her in that, and at the same time supporting this adoptive family who has just become parents, and they have so much love for this baby, but also for the birth parents. So they leave the hospital joyful, but also feeling torn because they've seen the pain that it's taken to become parents for this child. I am a little biased after witnessing what open adoption can look like for people.
We feel that that is a healthier environment for everybody. The adoptee has questions answered as to who do I look like, what's my story. An adoptee story doesn't start the day that adoption paperwork is signed.
The child grows up knowing who her birth parents are.
I was raised in a closed adoption, and I know a lot of people who were raised in closed adoptions, and once we grew up, we figured out that we would have liked to know who we were a lot sooner by having contact with our biological family.
It's just a mystery saying, oh, who are they and what do they look like and what do they sound like?
Part of my reason for going abroad was it was about as closed as you could get, because I knew as soon as we got on the plane leaving China, I wouldn't have a birth parent unexpectedly showing up alleging that the government didn't do things correctly.
With any adoption, there are always risks, but with open adoption, all of those risks are on the table and talked about and discussed. And so it's not suppressing any secrets, it's getting it all out there, which is scary for everyone involved, but ultimately leads to a far more fulfilling experience.
I think it just depends on the circumstances of the adoptive families and the birth parent and parents as to what, makes sense for them. Once all of your paperwork's been accepted, then you just wait for the Chinese government to say, we've matched you with the child. They give you a picture of the child they've matched you with. And we had been told that she was 3 months old. I never could connect with the picture. I just was like, okay, so here's the picture. When we got to China, they put this baby in my arms that, first of all, I immediately connected with. And while we were sitting there, I told my husband, I said, this baby's supposed to be 3 months old, but she's really, her eyes weren't tracking, she wasn't really following me. She was like behaving very newborn. So I was kind of worried a little bit that maybe there was something wrong. My husband said that you could see my arms just tightening around this baby, because basically they came over and told me that there'd been a mix-up. And what we found out was that the photo they'd sent us is the wrong photo and wasn't really our baby. The babies that we had in our arms were the right babies, but so it was kind of like this, that's how much I connected with them.
They're rare. There aren't many adoptions when you look at the number of pregnancies.
I think in our society, adoption right now is a necessary option.
There's many ways to build families, just like there's many different kinds of families. Families don't always have to be, a mom and a dad and 2.2 kids.
Like in my family, my stepchildren, I got guardianship of them when their mom went to prison. So even though it wasn't necessarily an adoption, it was similar to it, and I treat them just like I treat my biological kids.
But I think that one major thing that adoption has affected me on is probably the fact that I really want a kid. I want to really adopt a kid, actually. I don't think I'm treated differently because I'm adopted. I know a good few kids in the school know that I am adopted. I don't think anybody's ever said, oh, you're adopted, you're different or something like that.
I don't think it has affected me, but because it's basically the same. I think I pretty much act the same way I would if I were in Guatemala, except for that my accent's changed.
Everybody's not going to choose adoption. Everyone is not going to agree with adoption. But I believe the more choices we have as parents, the more success we're going to have as parents.
I think adoption's kind of just fine because it doesn't really matter if they're biological to the kid. It's just because they love their parents, and that's all.